Hello, happy Sunday. Coming from our couch on a cozy winter day. It was lovely a couple of days ago. Now it's snowing and raining and we are cuddled up on the couch. And Awareness School is this week, and so we wanted to talk about Awareness School things. And the topic for this morning I chose is The Devil is in the Details.
Well, that's the title.
That's the title.
The topic is It's All Your Fault, but the title is The Devil's in the Detail.
And it's about, in the post I made yesterday, is just like really, when you are still looking outside of yourself for the source of your problems, when you're still blaming, when you're still holding out just that little bit that it's like, well, it's kind of their fault. Like that 1% holdout zone where you're like, well, yes, I know I'm responsible. A lot of people at this point have kind of come around the idea of personal responsibility, and they know, they'll proclaim, I know I'm responsible for this, but, ... And then there's some type of externalization. I'm looking at, this situation or this person or this thing outside of me. And, the whole process of, becoming aware, so acutely aware. That's really what Awareness School is about, is seeing how the stuff comes from you. Even the stuff that it seems like it's not coming from you. And learning how, because if there's somewhere in your life where you're suffering, where you're having a problem, it is because you haven't seen something that you need to see. The devil is in the details. There's something hiding from you, usually in plain sight, and often it does just take some different ideas, some new ways of looking at these internal processes that go on 24/7, all day long, to see, that's the shocking moment. That's what we're going for. We're going for the aha moment, the oh shit moment, the speechless, I didn't think I was doing it. This is the golden opportunity to break the spell of it's somebody else's fault. It's coming from outside of me. It's him, it's this, it's that, it's my past, it's my whatever. And when you see it, there's first devastation. There's first this kind of crushing moment. But then soon after that, if you allow it, will come the ecstasy of empowerment, the seeing, so this is how I am responsible for this, and now I can actually do something different. But as long as you hold yourself in the position of it's something else outside of me, you're stuck with it. You're stuck with the thing. You're married to it. You're bonded to it. It and you become one and the same, and you can't experience life outside of that until you see something that you haven't seen yet that's in the dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a lot of things that are interpersonally reasonable, which is like, think about your husband, your wife, and how annoying they can be, or how inappropriate their behavior can be, or whatever. Because that's typically where people will kind of object to this stuff, or even if they accept it in principle, they will object to it via their experience, kind of from one day to the next. There are a lot of things that are interpersonally reasonable, or you might even say interpersonally true, that are tremendous impediments to doing intrapersonal work within yourself, discovering things about yourself. And my experience is that many people are so fixated on getting one up in an interpersonal interaction, or not being gotten one up on in an interpersonal interaction, that it's really hard for them to kind of shift gears. Because like at the interpersonal level, I want to make sure that this is not made out to be, or construed to be, or concluded to be my fault. And I'm going to reach up to the level of intrapersonal examination as high as I can reach, while keeping one hand on this door of interpersonal dynamics, because I want to make sure I don't get blamed for anything here. I want to learn things about myself up here that'll improve my life, as long as it doesn't place me at even a temporary, uncomfortable disadvantage interpersonally. That's not going to work. Just give up. Just continue on as you have done, right? If that's the thing. There is this willingness to completely cede all of the territory at the interpersonal level in pursuit of intrapersonal awareness and self-understanding. Now that it doesn't mean that you have to follow certain rules interpersonally. Just let your partner be right all the time. Just say it's your fault even if it actually isn't your fault. That's not what we're saying. But if you're honest with yourself, probably at some point you have felt a feeling when something that someone said, or that you read, or even maybe an idea or an insight that sort of arose from within you, kind of had a ring of truth to it. You know what? Seems like maybe some of this might be coming from me. Wait a minute. what was that thing my mind just said? That doesn't really match what they did. Do I do that often? Is that maybe a way that I unknowingly contribute to interpersonal dynamics that I complain about? You feel it, it's got a ring of truth to it, but then a part of you, in deciding whether or not to pull that thread, in deciding whether or not to pursue the inkling that could become an insight if it were pursued, it goes, you know what, we better not go down that hallway because we don't know what's at the end of it. We better not open that door, we don't know what's behind it. We better not allow ourselves to initiate that chain reaction of realization, because it might cause us to be burdened with certain things that we don't want to be burdened with, e.g., it's sometimes my fault when things don't go well interpersonally. It's primarily my fault when things don't go interpersonally, and or it might deprive us of certain things that we have become kind of emotionally dependent upon. Like, for example, unassailable victim status. Or, if you've spent some number of years telling yourself that the reason that you haven't achieved more of what you want in areas of life that are important to you is because of your partner, or because of this circumstance, that circumstance, the way the world is, or whatever. If you've been telling that to yourself, and this is hypothetical, right? I'm not even saying that's necessarily not true. We're imagining a scenario in which a person has been saying that to themselves, right? And then they begin to have an inkling that could be an insight. But a part of them, is a very shrewd psychologist, says, wait a minute, this insight might lead to realizations that make it so that story is no longer accessible to us, believable by us, usable to us. Do you see what I'm saying? I no longer qualify for that special exempt status as a result of realizations that will likely occur if I pursue this thing here. That person has a tremendous psychological incentive to kind of shut the door on that realization. Awareness is a peculiar thing because there's a sense in which you do have no control over it. It comes upon you. It's sort of Paul on the road to Damascus. You were blind and now you see. No one consulted you about it. It was just wham, you see yourself doing something. You can't unsee it, you did it. But for every one instance like that, there are probably, at the very minimum, 100, probably more like 1,000, maybe even 10,000 little instances of optional awareness where there's just a little squiggle. Those little squiggles on the periphery of your vision? If you kind of look, there's a little squiggle. Now, and there's a moment of, what would you call it? There's a moment in which awareness is accessible to you, but it has not fully come upon you. And it matters what you choose to do in that moment as to whether or not that awareness kind of comes to full fruition and impinges upon the psychic environment that is your mind. Does that make sense? So that you know what I'm talking about? There is an element of volition to it where I suddenly become aware of the fact that there's something just over here that I could become aware of if I allow my attention to go there. You know what I'm talking about? There's something that, this is sort of a strange example, but I think it's a real life example. I find bodily examples very, very interesting. If you've ever sort of like had the urge to belch, right? Like you've had a lot of soda or something like that. Sometimes it's just a complete involuntary, you're just talking and it happens, and it can be sort of embarrassing depending on what the circumstances are. It could be very funny. It could always be very funny, but sometimes it could also be a little embarrassing. But there are also situations where you kind of feel something and you sort of, give yourself a break. Or you say, excuse me, and you just stop. It could happen, but you've got a little bit of a say in whether or not it happens, and what you do determines whether or not it comes kind of to full thing. Well, awareness is a little like belching. so sometimes it's just out of your control. There's so much built up in there, it's going to come out one way or the other. But there are many, many, many instances in which the mind feels that there is, sort of like the concrete pavement parking lot of the mechanical mind feels that there's coming. And the mechanical mind has an option to allow that thing to come forward or to quash it. And now what you do in those moments is really rather important. And so that's kind of the big picture preface for what we're talking about here, because anybody who wants to can watch this video and they can say, that's toxic positivity, or they don't understand my relationship circumstances. They don't understand my personal history. And it's kind of like, listen, anyone can do that. Anybody can do that. If you want the kind of stuff that we're talking about here, the insights, the realistic, good faith cultivator of that awareness, and you've kind of got to do it with reckless abandon as to what the immediate interpersonal implications of that might be. Like if your priority is maintaining victim status or righteous status in your relationship with another person, that's going to be a tremendous impediment to your ability to open the floodgates of awareness necessary for you to really actually come to know yourself. And that self-knowledge is the most sort of liberating and enriching and empowering and freeing thing that there is. And so a lot of times people, it's sort of penny wise and pound foolish. It's like I'm scrounging with little pennies of petty rightness with you, and you're doing the same with me. And at the same time, we are both completely ignoring the incredibly high yield investment that would be candid, honest self-observation of ourselves, coming to know ourselves. I'm more concerned with winning out over you, with beating you in an argument, or with being right interpersonally than I am with being sane intrapersonally. You know what I'm saying? I would rather know that you're wrong and I'm right than actually know myself. You know, I would rather by force have the bizarre narratives that my insane mechanical mind cooks up accepted as true in the household than I would come to know things that are actually truly real about myself. And because those external petty victories are always hollow, they're always temporary, they always engender resentment from both parties, I'm always pursuing more and more and more of them. So the half-life of the pleasure associated with a petty interpersonal victory is very, very short. It's gone before you even know it. You know what I'm saying? But the rewards of a genuine and enthusiastically embraced self-insight are something that continue on in perpetuity. And the self-insight, when matured and when it reaches kind of full fruition, tends to automatically resolve a lot of the interpersonal disharmonies that the mechanical mind likes to fixate on. So the mechanical mind likes to fixate on interpersonal disharmonies because it's always possible to cook up a story that tells you why the disharmony is the other person's fault. So the mind really likes it, and so the mind will reward you with really nice feelings of righteousness, indignation, blemishless victimhood, etc. in the interpersonal. What the mind doesn't like is insight, because insight always reveals that it's in fact the mind's fault, that the problem is the problem finder. And it's not interested in that. And so so we would say that like what's advantageous for the mind is not necessarily what's advantageous for you. What's most rewarding for the mind or what's in the mind's interests is not necessarily in your kind of your true nature's interests. Because there is such a conflict of interest there, the mind, mechanical mind, will never really function as a good steward, as a good kind of fiduciary for your best interest, which is why the awareness thing is so important. You cannot trust your mind to do what's right for you because your mind has its own agenda. Do you know what I mean? There are many insights that are liberating for you that are devastating to the mind, and which is why it continually draws you down into these things. And so this kind of openness, it's not an openness to having somebody else tell you something. It's an openness, and this is a kind of a thing. It's like it is honor system, truly, because I can't look inside your head and say, you just quashed an insight. And even if I can look inside your head or look at your face and tell that you did it, even if I introduce that information to you, you've got to allow what that information sparks within you to kind of come into the field of your mind, because you can always deny that too. So that's kind of the depth of honesty that's required to really benefit from this work. And I'll tell you that the majority of people don't want to do it. And even the people who want to do it, the thing that they think they want to do, they don't even really fully understand how extensive it is. This is just personal experience. So it's not for everybody. No. I mean, let me say this material is for almost no one, which is not necessarily the best marketing strategy, but I do think it's true.
Oh, it's absolutely true. It wasn't for me. I mean, I liked the idea of it. I loved yes, I'm responsible and I can, be free from but when it comes to those moments where where those little inklings of awareness are kind of like bubbling up, and it's like, if I go there, I have to give up all of this, and this is like the biblical story of the rich man going like a camel going through the eye of a needle. It's like, you can't carry all that with you. You can't carry that story. You can't carry that blame. You can't carry that narrative into the land of awareness. And you have to, in order to see it and to see what's coming from me and to see how, and it's like, but the mind says, no, maybe this amount is coming from you, but that's the devil in the details. It's the part that says, but he did this, he didn't do that, but this and that, and your parents and your whatever. It's like, there's all these things that halt you from going through. You can't go through with it. And To relinquish it is to die. Like, there's parts of you that need to die in order to wake up and resurrect in the land of, I can see how this is coming from me, and I'm now responsible, because you can't take that full responsibility unless you see it in its fullness. And if we resist seeing it in its fullness, we're a prisoner. That means we're stuck in jail. That means we're stuck in hell. That means we're going to keep doing the same thing again and again and again until we see it in its fullness and stop halting that awareness that once it cracks through, it's just this. If you can kind of like go through that, and like Steve said, not everyone wants to do this, or you think you want to do it, but when it comes to actually, like, there's nothing more excruciating than being shown it in the moment. There's nothing more excruciating when you're like stuck on the story about why this thing happened and all of the external components, and you don't want to see the thing you most need to see, and so the kind of coming into the work, this awareness work, there's lots and lots of layers, and even taking one round of awareness school, you are just going to start to scrape the first layer of barnacles away, and you might not even get to the huge devastating realizations in the first 10 weeks of taking the course. But it's kind of like necessary groundwork to get to the place so you can really, really see, where the problems come from. And that's what this work really is. It's enjoying more of your life experience, having more freedom, really seeing. I need to know when stuff goes awry in my life, if there's an aspect of my experience that is not smooth and flowing. Awareness school, it helps you to see, I know exactly where that's coming from. Or at least I know
it, or this and that, the other thing. And it becomes very resistant to insights that come about as a result of something else. And then it comes up with all sorts of terminology to dismiss the validity of the source of that insight, so that it can justify disregarding it and discarding it, right? That's psychologizing. That's too intellectual. That's all this different crap. And it's the mind said your insight's going to come through body work, or the mind said your insight's going to come through a psilocybin experience. Your insight's going to come from looking at this chart and then making your decisions on the basis of this chart. And now, is there something wrong with any of that stuff? That's not what I'm saying. If you think it's what I'm saying, listen closely. Like that do I become resistant to insights when those insights come from a direction other than that from which my mind told me they would come? My mind is, because the mind knows how to be receptive to insights from sources that it knows no profound insight's going to come from. It's like that really funny example of the insurance policy that is valid so long as on a particular day in June there's a snowstorm in Arizona or something. And so the mind establishes all these arbitrary preconditions for accepting insight so that it can actually avoid those things. And the big part of the work is realizing, so there's basically different types of people who could be hearing this kind of message right now. One person says, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. I know what I want to do, and I want to change, and I know that's true. And anyone who says different is nuts. And then there's another person who hears it and says, that's interesting. I think I want to be different than I am. It seems like that could be true. And if it were true that I were unconsciously doing these things, I guess I wouldn't necessarily know it. And what does it feel like to be unconsciously doing something that you're doing right now? It feels exactly like how you feel right now, which is you feel like you're not doing it, And so typically a person who's open to the possibility that they are unwittingly contributing to something that they don't want, the chances that they're not contributing to it are much greater than are the chances that a person who is completely offended, outraged, I'm uncomfortable, I'm angry, I'm annoyed, not at the insistence that I'm doing it, but at the suggestion that I might be. So you can learn a lot about yourself just by observing. And listen, for every spiritual teaching, and esoteric teaching, personal growth teaching, whatever you want to call it, there is a true and an honest intrapersonal optional variation, and there's an annoying, overbearing interpersonal variation. Now, the annoying, overbearing interpersonal variation is where I say something to you, you show some emotion in response to it. I say, see right there? See, I'm right and you're wrong because you're getting upset. Can't you see that? And that's obviously clear. Now, interpersonally, I win because you're emotional, and that emotion means that I'm right. That's irritating, that's annoying, that's obviously not useful. On the other hand, it is kind of the case that you as an individual can observe the emotional reactions that occur within you in response to the presentation of certain ideas, and you can glean information. You become that open, honest, enthusiastic observer of your internal activity, right? I want more to learn about myself than I want to be right. I want, I want what I want at this interpersonal level. I want to make money. I want to get along with my partner. I want people to do what I want them to do. These are all things that I want. It's normal to want that stuff. You get into all kinds of trouble by pretending that you don't want those things. You become even sicker, even more dishonest, even more passive aggressive and convoluted and narcissistic and weird, because you convince yourself you don't want those things because good people aren't allowed to want those things, but you also continue wanting those things because those are natural things to want. And then you get angry at people in your life who seem to be aware that you want those things because you need them to not know that you want them as part of your project of not knowing that you want them. And you've got to not know that you want them because you've decided, your mind has decided that good people don't want that stuff. But your mind also wants that stuff. So it wants you to want it without knowing it. It wants you to get it without knowing that you want it. If you acknowledge to yourself that those things are true, at this level, things are true, but that there's also another level. You can say to yourself, at this level, life is not as I want it to be. And that's true. And I'm going to play at this level at creating the kind of life that I want. I also, though, want to acknowledge to myself there are other levels. So for instance, the level that how resourcefully am I responding to what has my attention right now? How resourcefully am I responding to the various realities that make up my life at this time? Financial reality, health reality, interpersonal reality, how you feel about just your fitness and how you look, your social status, and so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with optimizing that stuff. But also, what's your relationship to what your perception of the situation in each of those areas is? Is it a resourceful relationship or isn't? Are you emotionally resisting it? Are you using it to create suffering? Is there a part of you that secretly delights in the things that you're unhappy about? Is there a part of you that delights in the unhappiness itself? I don't know, but I know that you can find out if you observe what's going on inside enough. And that's really kind of what Awareness School is about. It's about developing the faculty that will allow you to engage in honest, accurate self-observation. Because there's a difference between thinking and observing, right? And kind of the way that we guide a person through the process of learning to tell the difference between those things for themselves is we have you observe what you're thinking. And if when you observe what you're thinking, a couple of useful things happens. You see what you're thinking. And the more you see what you're thinking, now I didn't say know what you're thinking, right? Because people will say, I know what I'm thinking. I know what I'm thinking. It's like, yeah, I know you know, but you're not looking. You're not observing. You're not watching. And so if that's a little bit like saying, if I say to you, you need to keep your eye on your child because they're playing in a dangerous area of the yard. And you say, listen, I know my child. You know your child. You know their preferences. You know their personality. You know they're a good boy and they're a good girl. But if you're not watching them, you don't know that they're about to, put the lawnmower on the trampoline. Are you watching what the child is doing right now? That's different than knowing the child and knowing that they're good or knowing that they're whatever. Same thing with the mind. Knowing that you tend towards negativity or pessimism or that you deal with anxiety is not the same thing as observing it in the moment that it is engaging in the activities that it's engaging in. And by the way, you can't really have a relationship with someone by knowing them. There's a lot of people I know, I have zero relationship with them. Having a relationship with someone means you spend time with them. It means you actually pay attention to them, right? Same thing with the mind. Same thing with your thinking. Same thing with your feelings. Same thing with all this different stuff. There's a difference between feeling a feeling and observing a feeling, right? And you can actually feel a feeling, wallow in a feeling, talk about the feeling all day long. You can make your entire life about feeling inadequate, or about feeling like, you are disempowered or oppressed or whatever. And it could be, you could do nothing but talk about it. There are people who do this. But if you aren't observing the feeling and observing yourself as you feel it and observing your relationship to it and observing the things that you say to yourself about it, the things that you say to yourself that contribute to that feeling and how you respond to things on the outside that interfere with or contradict that feeling, right? If you're not observing that stuff, you're not really spending time with yourself. So as you go through that process, you start to see things that you're doing that are perhaps contributing to results that you don't want in your life. And also you'll see things that you're doing that are perhaps contributing to results that you do want, because there probably are some things you're doing that work. But the other thing is that the more time you spend being aware, the more sensitive you become to the force called awareness. It becomes a presence within you. It becomes a kind of a companion, right? Loneliness is unawareness. 100%, without equivocation. People need a tribe. People need a community. People need listen, interpersonally, it's very fine. Socializing's okay. But, this is one of those things, too. Everyone can get really upset about this if they want to, or we could cut the bullshit and get to something that's really true, which is that there's all sorts of unconscious, dysfunctional, mechanical thinking and estrangement from self that masquerades behind all of the talk about how important community is. Which is why, I don't know if you know this, but people who are looking for communities get together and form communities, and guess what? Once they're there, after the buzz wears off, they start getting very dissatisfied, and they start complaining about the community, and then they say, well, I need another community who's going to do a different thing, right? And it's like the problem with every community that you go to is that you haul your mechanical nonsense with you. So awareness, or loneliness then, is self-estrangement. Self-estrangement is unawareness. As you observe the thoughts over time, it's kind of like cultivating a very slow-growing plant. You begin to sense this presence called awareness within you. Now, and you become more sensitive to it. Now, the wonderful thing about that, now we have something really great happening. We have a mechanism, we have a force within us that observes the goings-on of the mechanical mind, so that, one, it doesn't matter what the mechanical mind is doing. We recognize the doing as the doing of the mechanical mind. So if it paints a horrible picture, and if that horrible picture generates a unpleasant emotional state, it's kind of not a problem, because we understand, oh, that's the mechanical mind doing naughty, mechanical, unresourceful things. That's what that is. It's not reality. So that awareness is like this wonderful kind of fiery sword that comes down and separates reality from mental activity. So that if I make an unpleasant picture and feel an unpleasant feeling, it's unpleasant and it's there, but there's this clear dividing line between the mind and its activity and the emotional consequences of it and this thing out here called reality. Because if you pay close attention, which you can only do with awareness, you'll notice that what you're actually upset about is not the possibility that things are going wrong. Or things may go wrong. What you're upset about is the fact that your mind is making pictures that create bad feelings, and then there's a part of that same mind that conflates the fact that it's able to make scary feelings in response to unpleasant pictures. It turns that into a forecast about what is likely to happen. There's a blurring of the line between how I feel about reality and possibility that exists out here and how I feel as a result of what the mind's doing inside my head. Awareness divides those things up. Talking about problems in relationships, if it's not clear what the responsibilities are, what's your responsibility, what's my responsibility? Now you could talk about that domestically, financially, but even conversationally. Is it my responsibility to make sure you don't go out of your way to deliberately misinterpret something that I said in an uncharitable way? No, it's not. It's my responsibility to do my best to articulate what it is that I'm intending to say, and it's your responsibility to do your best, to really do your best to interpret it in the most charitable way possible, or at least a reasonable way, and, vice versa, right? But if those lines aren't clearly defined, you'll say something to me, I will opportunistically and uncharitably misinterpret it, then you'll run around chasing your tail, trying to deal with the fact that I am letting down an end of my responsibility. And I can always deny the fact that I did it because it was subtle, and I do it in a way that maintains plausible deniability. Doesn't it create a mess? I don't know if you know what I'm talking about. I guarantee you it happens in your relationship. 100% it happens in your relationship. When the dividing line is very clear. Now, this is another thing, too. Your relationship to yourself and your relationship to other people, there are fundamental patterns and principles that apply across the board. Very nice. And so when you divide between mental activity and you understand it and recognize it for what it is and the emotional consequences of it, and reality, it doesn't matter what the mechanical mind is doing. So that's one advantage. The other advantage is the more aware you become of your mind's activity, the more that activity tends to be useful. That awareness, there's a certain saturation point at which awareness begins to exert a spontaneously corrective influence upon the thing observed. This is especially true when the thing observed is mental activity, but not only. You can actually do it with things in your outer world too. But you observe it, you see it's not serving you, you recognize it for what it is, it just starts falling away. But if this is the level of the mechanical mind, and the mechanical mind's being negative, and you go, no, don't be negative, be positive. For it's like there's this equal and opposite pull, and sometimes your attempt to make it positive, it almost is like a rubber band that sends it back more negative. You've got to just leave it alone. Let the mind do what it's doing. Go up here to awareness, which is a higher level. Observe it, recognize it for what it is. Just see it, right? See the consequences of it. Let those consequences wash over you, because it's like letting nothing wash over you, because it's just made up. It's just imaginary, and that you can experience the truth of that once you're sufficiently aware. At that point, what doesn't serve you starts to fall away. So all of a sudden now you've got a mind that's operating more resourcefully, and you're also aware enough. And when we talk about being aware enough, you could even say sane enough, because there's a sense in which awareness is sanity, because awareness improves mental activity, and awareness also makes you impervious to whatever unresourceful mental activity might occur, right? So now we've got a situation where it doesn't matter what my mind is doing, because I'm whole within myself, regardless of what it's up to, and it behaves itself more of the time. Doesn't that sound like a relationship? Wow, I'm in a relationship now where it doesn't matter what my partner is doing, because I have accepted and I experience 100% responsibility for my life. Oh, and by the way, guess what? My partner behaves herself a lot more of the time, behaves himself a lot more of the time. Your relationship to your mind is your relationship to everything. 100% guaranteed. And so that's the reason that we kind of emphasize that from the outset. And we kind of bounce back and forth, right? So that this interpersonal work improves relationship stuff, but then also interpersonal relationship stuff is just a venue in which you can practice this interpersonal work. So that's kind of what we do in Awareness School.
Totally. Do you want to answer this one?
I don't know who that is.
You start reading that book?
Oh, is that the 48 Laws of... Okay, yeah. I haven't listened to all of it. It's actually interesting that you mentioned that, because I only recently started listening to the audiobook. I think that he's got some very truthful insights about the reality of what goes on at the interpersonal level. Definitely. And I think there's probably a lot of what we might call kind of uppity spiritual people who would go, oh my God, that's so bad, that's so terrible. No, he's describing exactly the reality of interpersonal relations in the world. Is it mostly political? It's like, well, but I mean, this is a political relationship, right? I mean, say it is. All relationships are basically political, because politics is nothing but a whole bunch of knots of personal relationships. And so I think the books are interesting. I wouldn't want to be a person reading that book who hadn't done a lot of kind of awareness work personally, because I think that you can become one of those kind of nerdy acolytes, or one of those people that just becomes kind of religious about it. When you have enough awareness to hear the things that he's saying and reflect on your own personal experience, oh, you know what, I think I know an example of that, and oh gosh, that's true, people are that way, and oh, you know what, I've done that myself too. So there's this interesting thing where if you step into a model and you don't have sufficient awareness, the model becomes an impediment to developing more awareness, because the model allows the mind to have this delusion that it is aware, that it is awareness, that it doesn't need awareness, that it's set, right? And the mind loves coming to that conclusion. You can watch yourself come to that conclusion. You can feel heaviness and dryness, and you can feel a cessation of genuine insight, right? So if I adopt a model and I don't have the prerequisite awareness to support that model, or to say maintain my freedom within the context of exploring the model, I'm in trouble. But if I've got awareness, and then I try out a model, and then I practice awareness with regard to that model, all of a sudden the model becomes more useful to me, and it actually becomes a vehicle through which I can develop more awareness. So
that's like GNM. It's like any model, like the awareness is kind of apart and separate from it. It's like I need to develop this ability to see the mechanical action of the mind. It really is. It's like I compared it to like being sober, like that sanity, is being able to see, am I drunk on a model? Am I high on a model? Because we go into the mechanical mind with all of these different, any ideology that brings like a surge. That's the thing, is like awareness is like, it's just sober. It's just reality. It's just paying attention to what is, without all sorts of jargon and words and, rightness, and it's just seeing. It's clear seeing, and that's why it's kind of boring. A lot of people they like the high of the model. They want to go let's go into something and do a thing. And people will think that that's what they're getting into in Awareness School. It's like, let's get into this and do a thing and be a group that does this thing. It's like, that's like, this is about clear seeing, sober, honest. This is what my mind is doing. This is how my mind has taken hold of this idea and done something crazy with it, how it is causing me more suffering. Like if I'm taking an idea, if I'm taking a model and it's causing me, if it's allowing me to feel superior, if it's allowing me to create some kind of drama with other groups that believe other things, it's a tool and it's using you and you are not using it. And that's the thing, is awareness allows you to use the tools instead of being used by the tools. But that's why you have to be able to see a model for a model, and awareness for awareness.
Mm-hmm.
Someone else had a question. Let's see. How often do you have a chance to join Awareness School? Well, currently we've been doing it 4 times a year, but we're switching up our model. We're working with someone who's, we are just kind of rescheduling how we operate Awareness School. So we are moving forward, only going to do it a couple of times a year, maybe once or twice. And so we were planning on doing a summer round, but I think we're going to launch a new thing in the summertime. And so, so this spring class, this round runs at 10 a.m. on Tuesdays, and I think we'll probably do a fall class, but it's not for sure, just figuring out how we are going to do this new scheduling. So, and then as far as this person asked about discount possibilities, there is always a window of early bird enrollment, and so that's the best discount that you'll get on Awareness Schools if you join during the early bird enrollment. Any other questions or things people want to talk about? Awake to one's patterns is consciousness awareness. Yes. Anything else you wanted to add to that?
I mean, I suppose I could, but that's kind of the whole thing. It's an interesting process. It's real. One of the things is when I was growing up, I noticed a pattern of people in my family. It was just the age of infomercials, like the 90s, early 2000s, and there was this recurring theme where people would buy things off of the television, exercise equipment, etc. And it would come and it would never be used, or it would be used one time and never used again. Sometimes it would be used one time and it was crap and it was never used again. That makes sense. But sometimes it was used and the person's like, "Ooh, that was a good workout," and then it was never used again. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what was going on. But I never, and people joked about it. It's like a thing, the coat rack, and everyone, ha ha. That's one thing, by the way, when people, when you're around people and they go, well, that's that, one step forward, 2 steps back, well, that real kind of conspicuously mechanical reaction. There is something there to be aware of that would be very rewarding to be aware of that the mind does not want you to pick up on. So when people joke about catch-22s, when they joke about inconsistencies, when they joke about peculiarities of human nature, well, there's just no explaining that. Yes, there is. Pay attention and watch. You'll figure it out. And I figured it out with the exercise equipment for the longest time. And the joke was in the house, and it was, here we go. We're going to buy it and not use it. Well, that's just how it goes. And I was thinking, I think something's going on here that would explain this, that would allow for a more full understanding of it. And the thing was, they weren't buying the exercise equipment. And they weren't even buying the results that the equipment promised. I noticed that there was watching it on TV, becoming interested in it, and this would go over a period of weeks. Oh, look at that. That's kind of neat. Oh, that'd be great. I got to work on that. I got some real flab here. This is the spot reduction to the age when everyone thought that crunches were going to get rid of belly fat, you know what I mean? Which is just amazing to me. And so there was a period of time with a growing interest, and then there was I'm going to get that thing. I'm going to get it. And I'm going to get it for several weeks. It was going on and on. But then there'd be a special, and it wasn't real special. It was a pretend special. That's kind of like what we do for Awareness School, right? There's pretend specials for it. Now we do the early bird, but we don't do additional discounts because there's so much free material that you should just do that and do the course when and if you actually want to do it. But it is kind of funny when there's like the 50% off the course that was increased by 100% a minute ago. And they'd finally buy it. And they were so excited when they bought it. And that excitement turned into this really content and peaceful lifestyle. Because before they saw the product, they knew they needed to exercise. And they felt bad about not doing it. They saw the exercise product and said, I got to get that, right? They were excited about getting it. They then ordered it. And in the interval of time between ordering it and it arriving, there was nothing for them to do. They had done everything that they could do. And they didn't have to exercise. So they got to live the lifestyle they were living before, which is not really taking care of themselves, not really working out. But they didn't have to feel bad about it in that window of time because they had taken a step. I got this equipment, but it hasn't come yet, so I can't do anything. And I realized that's what they're paying 5 easy payments of $99.95. It was for that wonderful, peaceful interval of time between when the order was placed and when the equipment arrived. That's what the payment was actually for. And the device itself was like, a statue of Mary or like a crucifix, or something like that. It was something symbolic, that you could get. But the real essence of what they were going after was that blissful time when they could eat ice cream and sit on the couch, really feeling relaxed, because don't worry, a machine is coming, and once it comes, you're going to put it together, and believe me, you're going to use it this time. That's what they were really going for. And that's kind of how the mind approaches a lot of this stuff. It's how the mind approaches personal growth stuff. So when you enroll in this, I would just caution you, and I would say there's a part of you that thinks that you're going to enroll in this and it's going to be exactly the same as anything you've ever done before, fundamentally, and that it isn't going to disturb the things that it really doesn't want you to disturb. So as you watch yourself. If you're like a person who goes to the sales page and goes, okay, I don't know, do I want to do? Okay, I think I'll do that, and you pay the money and all. Watch how you feel when you think about enrolling. Watch how you feel after you have enrolled. Watch how you feel in the lead up to the first meeting. Watch how you feel when you have access to the course materials. Watch what your mind says to you. What does it say? Well, you'll get to it later. Well, it doesn't start until next week. Okay, well, go ahead and do it now. Just pay attention to how you relate to taking the course and not taking the course. I'm telling you, there's probably somebody that's going to watch this, and they're going to say to themselves, I can't really afford to do awareness school right now, or it's not the right time of year for me to do it right now. And so I'm not going to do it now, but I am going to do it later. And something inside says, okay, so we're not going to make progress until we take that course, but that course is going to guarantee our progress. So for the next 2 or 3 months, we're just going to kind of languish, but we're going to take it easy. Watch that. I'm telling you, that's a killer. That part will not go away when and if you ever actually enroll in the course. You can learn so much about yourself by observing your relationship to what you do, regardless of what you choose to do. Watch it. I mean, don't you think that's probably the best possible thing? I mean, have you ever had a personal growth person tell you that before? Buy the course, don't buy the course. I don't really care. I mean, I like it when people buy the course, but in terms of your personal development, the most important thing that you do is, if your mind is saying things to you about us or about this course, observe the fact that your mind is saying that stuff to yourself and see if it bears resemblance to what your mind says to you in other areas of your life, especially areas of your life that you're not satisfied with. You know what I'm talking about? And allow the insight to wash over you. Now, does that result in you saying, I'm going to go buy that course even if I have to do the payment plan? I don't know. Maybe it will, but it might not. It might be like, this is the same exact bullshit. It's telling me that, just enroll in this and then everything will be taken care of for you. That's not how it works. You get in the course consists of a lot of invitations and opportunities for you to do stuff, but at the end of the day, when you wake up, I'm not there with you. When the opportunity for insight and awareness arises, there is no course I can create that will allow me to be present with you. And it's your willingness to do little things here and there persistently, and to endure a long series of minor and imminently manageable discomforts, right? It's coming to terms with the fact that you are as you are at a given moment in time. Now, that's an individual activity, right? You got to recognize you're being mean when you're being mean. You got to recognize you're throwing a pity party when you're throwing a pity party. It is individual instances of self-recognition that are jarring or unpleasant or whatever. But after a certain number of those, it generalizes and it becomes an overall skill, so that you are good at recognizing, becoming aware of, acknowledging the reality of who and what you are and what you're doing at a given moment in time, regardless of what it is. It becomes perfectly natural for you to acknowledge nastiness within yourself. If it's happening right now, it becomes easy. So it's not about learning how to endure pain forever. It's about learning how to form a relationship to truth, to awareness, to insight, to just responding resourcefully to whatever happens to be true to you, for you, about you at a given moment in time, without emotional resistance, so that it isn't painful. That's really kind of what it's about. And that's not something you have to take a course in order to be able to do. You don't have to take a course to do that. You can take this course. You can enroll in our course and pay us this money, even come to the classes and not do the work. You can do the work without taking the course. I will say it's the best course in the world. I really feel that's true. And there's nobody who teaches this stuff like we do. That's absolutely true. It's not even a marketing statement. It's just something I feel very good, because I've interacted with a lot of people and observed a lot of people, and they just don't cover the stuff like this. So that's the kind of self-aggrandizing side. But the other side is, listen, nobody can be so great that they can force you to be different. And you're not so pitiful that you're not capable of being different all by yourself. And so you got to kind of process both those things in order to come to the behavioral solution output of, am I going to take it now? Am I going to take it later? Right? If you take it now for the right reasons, which is know that you're going into it a little bit dishonestly, probably. I think that's the thing. If you're comfortable with the prospect that you're enrolling in this course with at least a partially dishonest motivation, you might be ready to take the course. If you're not, I would say watch my stories, watch Melissa's stories, and think twice, I guess.
Why did the love and light communities fail to see the devil within themselves?
I mean, it's inconsistent with... So the mind has accepted certain ideas about what's true, and those insights would contradict those ideas. And the person's delegated so much of their destiny to their mechanical mind that if the mechanical mind judges it to be not in its interest to allow that insight to come in, it just doesn't come in. That's it. I mean, it's psychologically inviable to discover the truth about themselves, because discovering the truth about themselves would reveal the falsity of an ideology to which they have become unduly attached, right? And they aren't interested. And here, another thing too is that a lot of people adopt these ideologies and these dogmas primarily as a tool for social interaction. I want to meet somebody. I want to have a community. So it's all about that. So if I have a personal insight that would interfere with the ideology's ability to provide for me socially, right, I'm going to have a tremendous psychological advantage, incentive to not let that insight come through. So, that's one possible explanation.
Yeah. Where does our want to be in a community come from? It takes a village to raise kids. I mean, it did at a time. I mean, as far as community goes, it's just kind of a biologically hardwired thing that herds do well, packs do well, tribes do well, because we kind of pool our resources. We have a leader. We hunt, we gather, we do things as a group, and that was absolutely important for survival. And so there's that biological hardwiring for the tribe, for being in the community, being included. But again, that at one point was biologically necessary in order to survive. It isn't any longer, but the hardwiring is still there, but we've also created a concept around it. And so while certain things may be easier in a tribe for basic survival, we have also romanticized, we've turned it into an idea of the tribe, my group, my people, the in crowd, the out crowd. I need to be with the in crowd. And so again, we can take something that's just natural and just a reflection of biological reality, but then the mechanical mind turns it into a thing that we need in order to be okay. I need to be a member of this group. I need to have a community. I need to have people who are like-minded around me in order to be okay. So here I am looking at this external thing saying I need that in order to be okay, rather than, it would practically make sense for me to be living in a community of other people so that we could pool our resources, or we can, just devise the way of surviving in this world in a way that makes more sense. But you have to kind of differentiate, and that's kind of like all this work it is. It's like, what's actually necessary in order for, comfort and survival, versus what has my mind turned into this big idea, this big thing that I now need in order to be okay.
Yeah. Actual hunter-gatherers probably didn't fetishize tribes. It was very much a practical kind of thing. I'm not an anti-community person in principle. In fact, often perhaps I am. So here's the thing. Dark, cool environments foster the growth of mold, right? Now, does that mean that you shouldn't have dark, cool environments anywhere? No. But if you have them, be aware of the possibility that you're going to have some mold accumulate there. Social interactions in general. I mean, as soon as you've got another person in your life, there is the possibility of confusion, just in the form of just static. Not one mood, two moods, right? Not one opinion, two opinions, right? Not one physical body bumping around space, two physical bodies bumping around space. And does that mean it's a bad thing? It's not a bad thing. It's a question of what kind of an environment does it create, and to what extent and in what ways does that environment provide camouflage and cover for the little shenanigans that my mind wants to get up to? That's all it is. It's not about don't have a relationship with anyone or don't have a relationship with many people. It's be aware of the fact that these relationships and the interpersonal drama and tension and all of the mechanical mental activity that goes on with regard to the prospects of interpersonal drama and tension. Well, I don't know because I don't want to go, but then if I don't want to go, if I don't go, she's probably going to think this, and I don't want so-and-so to chatter. And the more the mind is chattering the more I'm likely to get fixated on a particular line of chatter, the less likely I am to become aware of the fact that my mind is in a state of insanity, right? So it provides cover. Just like in a way, it's almost easier to have a private conversation in a room full of people, all of whom are talking, than it is to have a private conversation. If just you and I are here talking and someone's wired or bugged the house, if you get picked up on, you know what I'm saying? But if I'm in a room full of just bah, 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 then I could actually probably talk in a room volume voice to you and nobody would hear it. And it's kind of like that with these interpersonal interactions. I don't know if you've noticed this, but there's some people who use socializing as a way of escaping themselves. They're very uncomfortable if they're alone. And it's not that, this is interesting, spend time alone if you're a kind of a real extrovert. Spend time alone and see if you feel uncomfortable. And if you feel uncomfortable, see if you can tell whether you're uncomfortable because you miss other people or because you are uncomfortably present with yourself. Those are different. I'm not saying one or the other is always true, but it's distinguishing little things like that. So it's not that, see, watch, the mind wants to say, I need to go be a hermit in a cave. The mind wants to say, I need to go live on a commune, right? There's crazy people in both of those camps, right? That the mechanical mind's insanity will find a way to make a home wherever you take it. My thing is just observe what it is that you choose to do, or observe the situation in which you currently find yourself and see the manner in which your mind is misusing that.
Yeah. Do we need each other for mirroring to learn more about ourself, our triggers, our activation? Well, that's going to be like a lot of mechanical mirroring. I think like, who is the self that you're trying to learn about, and that is, I think what people do is they get in these community, I need this in order to, you're going to use those people to see mechanical things about yourself. And so, yes, do we need it? It's something you're going to encounter, and so the more that you interact, and again, it depends on your model. Like, what am I trying to see? A lot of people think that they are using these triggers in other people to see things about themselves, but it's kind of this idol they've formed of themselves in their mind. It's not like the real self. It's like, it's the costume. It's the character that they have developed in their mind, called themselves, that they are using other people to mirror and to get to know.
See, do you see it? Even in that question, do we need each other for mirroring? And the answer, you're going to get one or two answers from that, right? Yes or no. And whichever answer you get, you're going to accept or reject. So if I say yes, loop is closed. If I say no, loop is closed. If you accept it, whichever I say, loop is closed. If you reject it, loop is closed. The mind loves it. The mind loves that. It says, that's the conclusion. We're going to stop thinking, and we're going to then kind of just spiral from that one thought. We're going to just produce from that mold, like a factory in China producing some plastic something or other. It's the mind loves to come to conclusions. Awareness doesn't loop. It doesn't close loops. It doesn't open loops. It's just observing. So an intelligent person could conceivably, and in a sincere way, say interacting with other people can be useful because it can allow you to see certain things. I'm very sensitive to jargon. So when people start talking about mirroring, and when people start talking about triggering and all this different stuff, not that those words are taboo or necessarily always unresourceful in describing things that actually happen in reality, but they are so popularly used that if I don't know the person, so I don't know you, right? And so if I don't know the person, I don't know if that person's mind has shut down and is just kind of throwing out these ideas for my mind to say, yes, it's great, or no, it's terrible, and here's why. And it's really hard to tell in situations like that. So those words can be referring to real life phenomenon that are, say, important, or important to know about, or important to notice or tell. There is a lot of gobbledygook that gets smuggled in underneath that stuff. Some of the time it's because the concepts themselves are defective. Some of the times, though, it's just because mass adoption of a concept tends to lead to corruption of it, because 1,000 mechanical minds are chattering about the same thing. It's going to kind of, So my personal feeling is I've got to be present with a person who is talking about the model or using the model to interpret their experience. If I'm present with them, I can tell you to a high degree of certainty, at least for me, that person's using that model in a way that I would not recommend a person use this models. You know what I'm saying? They're blabbermouthing about that. They're just that. But if I'm not in the presence of the person, I don't know, because there's a lot of concepts that I think are stupid. But I've been around people, and that I just think I wouldn't describe it that way. But I've been around people who seem to be using it in an intelligent way, and in a situation like that, I don't have an anti-model that requires me to be upset about that. But I've also seen a whole bunch of people who start talking kind of in platitudes, and it's a different kind of platitude than their parent used, but it's the same kind of mind-numbing kind of thing. So I'd be more comfortable saying being around other people can be useful. It certainly can be useful for revealing things about yourself. It can also be a distraction. Being alone can be useful because it can really leave you with yourself. I mean, what are you doing? That's probably the main thing. If you're living by yourself and you're just bumping around unconsciously, well, you're not going to really discover anything. If you're living in a household teeming with people and everyone's triggering everyone and everybody's mirroring everybody and everything's a big mess and all this different stuff, and you're watching what's going on, you'll see what's going on. That's the key thing. If I'm observing what's happening, I'll see what's happening. And if what's happening is somebody's using spiritual gobbledygook to gain passive aggressive leverage over somebody else in a sort of really unseemly way, I'll go, seems like that's what's happening here. It's the awareness, it's the observing for me that has been essential, because it's the same thing that allowed me when I was a kid sitting in a church that I didn't particularly want to be in to go, some of what's going on here seems odd to me. It doesn't pass the kind of the smell test. Do you know what I mean? It's just weird stuff happening. It's that same thing that causes me at many gatherings of a lot of spiritual people just to sort of go, boy.
Will this help identify commitments to poverty and never having enough, planting seeds but not letting them bloom? Well, certainly, but that's, if that's an external life experience that you keep having, there is there's a mechanical way in which your mind is kind of set up to function with regard to financial abundance and having what you need. And so absolutely, this is something that when you see, there's this idea I've consented to unconsciously because of this and that thing, you'll start to see, this is how I run that mechanical program. This is how my mind has defaulted to, this is what's true, this is what's real, this is what reality is. And I'll be able to see, no, that's an idea. That is a model that I have formed in my mind, which makes sense that my mind formed this model, but there are things that I can do to change it. So yes.
It'll help you create what you want. Or if the desire is just designed to create disharmony and unhappiness for you, it'll help you drop it. When it comes to money stuff, I think a lot of people's mechanical thinking makes making money harder than it needs to be. And I think a lot of people have a psychological incentive to create not what they want in the area of finances. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other practical challenges that one has to overcome in order to be successful with money, making it, keeping it, growing it, so on and so forth. But if the money symbolizes a whole bunch of stuff to you, you know what I'm saying? If it symbolizes making it and you have a belief in inadequacy, or if you're kind of addicted to the ups and downs of not knowing if you're going to make it and just barely making it, that can create a psychological incentive to engage in sort of behaviors that in the macro will prevent you from making money that you could otherwise make, or prevent you from making good money choices that you could otherwise make. And so it's not like a miracle manifestation, instantaneous, now I have all this money. But I have had personal experiences. Generally speaking, a lot of money problems are tied up with self-importance, which sounds kind of counterintuitive because a lot of times it's self-worth issues. The person thinks they don't deserve it. The person thinks they're not smart enough. The person thinks it's hard and they're not up to it, and so on and so forth. And oftentimes people are held back not so much by the difficulty inherent to figuring out how to get people to give you money in exchange for a good or service that you have to offer. They're hung up by difficulties that their mind imposes upon them, right? And, one of the things is people have a hard time making enough money because if they don't believe they're good enough, they're going to be disinclined to take the actions that would allow them to create a result that would contradict that belief. I do think that is something that happens. And so for me, we could tell you, of course you're good enough, sweetheart. You deserve to have everything you want, or you go out there, big guy, and make all that money. You can do that, but it's not going to stick. For me, it's getting over the self-importance. I think I'm not good enough. Well, who gives a shit what I think? But I'm talking about that. I'm talking about mechanical mind. In fact, I'm self-important. I think I can't do it. I think I know everything. I think I am a reliable source of information with regard to what can and can't be done. Self-importance. And you drop that, everything's fine. I'm afraid of rejection. Well, who cares what you're afraid of? Because you think fear is a big deal, or you think that your mind's a big deal. And as you begin to experience that liberation, not just ping-pong the idea around in your mind, that's nice, but when you get to the point where you really just feel that, and also when you come to accept the possibility, you may never make the kind of money that you want to make. That's a possibility. And when that's not terrifying to you anymore, oh my God, the actual achievement of the result of the book, because doesn't the fear that you'll fail to get the thing that you want, doesn't, if you just check inside, isn't the secret fear of the prospect of failure a tremendous impediment to you maximizing the chances that you're going to go out and do the things you need to do to get the things that you actually want to get? The answer is yes, it is. And when you, now how do you get over the fear of failure? Well, you can tell yourself, failure is impossible. I'm not going to fail. I'm going to make it. Now, at that level, it's a perfectly fine thing to do. That's actually, I think, a pretty useful thing to do. The other level, though, is you float up here and you go, listen, success or failure, at the end of the day, I'm kind of dust and bones, or I'm an ethereal stardust child. I'm going to float off into the cloud. One way or another, whether I'm a financial success in this life, there is a level from which it doesn't actually matter all that much. It doesn't matter enough for me to worry about. But it does matter enough for me to sort of sit back, relax, and sort of see, let's see what we can make happen here. Now, when you are able to step into that mode, practical problem solving, solution finding, goal setting, and going for it, not to prove anybody right or wrong, or not to avoid any fears or anything like that, but just simply because, listen, I'm here. There's a thing called money here. It seems like it's fun to have. Might be kind of fun to figure out how to make it. Let's do that. When that's your, like, down to the marrow of your bones, that's how you think about the situation, then you begin to tap into resources within you. I think that can make money making feel super easy. It's weird. It's a strange thing to go. I mean, there was a period of time in our life when we were making zero money, and we needed to be making quite a bit. And I remember feeling like there was nothing wrong with me with regard to making money. That's just how I felt. But I also looked at the results and I said, you know what? The results suggest otherwise. And so my awareness work in that time was rather uncomfortable, because I didn't want to deny reality in order to enshrine the feeling. But at the same time, I didn't want to deny the feeling and simply just say to myself, well, obviously there is something wrong. I had to bring it all to the table, and I had to be comfortable with the tension created by the inconsistency. I don't feel like I have money hang-ups. And I'm also pretty fucking broke. I mean, it was kind of like, and that, now, see, that was what I was uncomfortable with. Interestingly, I was uncomfortable with being a non-integrated person. I was uncomfortable not with being broke, not with feeling like I had no money problems or that I had evolved beyond them. I was uncomfortable with the fact that I was capable of feeling that I didn't have money hang-ups given my paltry performance in the financial world. Now, that was what I needed to put on the table, right? That if it's not, the problem isn't your spiritual nature or your sort of angel nature. And the problem isn't the fact that sometimes you just want to slap somebody when they really are just misbehaving or giving you a hard time or tell them to F off or whatever. The problem is the discomfort that you feel when you allow yourself to be aware of both of those elements of yourself at the same time. And something inside goes, man, this doesn't seem right. Oh, this isn't consistent with the ideology. Oh, this is not my persona. This is not good for PR. That's the issue. See, that commitment to an idea, a commitment to an idea that results in willful estrangement from self. That's the problem, right? Iron that wrinkle out and then see what happens. That's the iron that wrinkle out, and then it becomes possible for you to learn practical things that will allow you to create the kind of financial success that you want. It's not that, take this course and get your mind just spiritually right and all of a sudden money happens. There are intermediary steps, but in order to get to those steps, in order to take those steps, and in my opinion, in order for those steps to work, or in order for you to enjoy the results of those steps working, you kind of got to do something about the fact that everything's all kind of kinked up in here. And you get freaked out when you start seeing how kinked up it is. You get freaked out when you start seeing that there are these inconsistencies within you. Why is that freaked out feeling there? Some part of you is unconsciously committed to an idea that you've got it more together than you do. And that is what is preventing you from getting it together. See, you have signed, this is the thing, people sign a contract to pretend to believe they're further along than they are, which prevents them from seeing how far along they're not, which prevents them from getting farther along than they currently are. Does that kind of resonate a little bit? And so there is this strange and peculiar process by which what you need is not sentimental, saccharine, self-love, everything's so... I'm suspicious of that. You just need a very no-nonsense permission to be as you are at a given moment in time, because that permission facilitates recognition of the way that you are, not justification, not pat on the backs, not bullshit rationalizations, or not, none of that crap. Just, listen, here it is. I don't think I have a money problem. I'm not making any money. Something obviously is going on. This is one of those things too. developing the confidence necessary to know for a fact that there is something relevant outside of your awareness. Be aware of the fact that there's something really important impinging upon your life right now that as of this moment is outside of your awareness. Because you've got two options in a situation like that. One, deny the possibility that something super important is outside of your awareness because you don't want to get caught not knowing, or you don't want someone else to know before you do. So I'm just going to not know it all, right? Or you just say to yourself, hey, I'm in a funny position right now. Talk about like vulnerability. Now that's a bullshit term that gets thrown around a lot. I'm going to be vulnerable with you, or I'm going to be vulnerable with this. And I know sometimes it's, but a lot of the times it's not. Real vulnerability is, I am aware of the fact that there are things that I am not aware of that I really need to be aware of, right? There are things that I'm not aware of that I will benefit from being aware of that I really don't want to go through the process of realization that is becoming aware of. That's, in a sense, that's sort of giving birth to an insight. I want the insight. The insight's inside of me. I really don't want the process of the insight going from inside to outside. I don't want the discomfort associated with that transition from insight to outside or whatever. You know what I mean? What do you do in that situation? The quicker you can accept the reality that that's where you are, the better off you'll be, and the faster it'll go. And the more times you do it, the easier it becomes, so that you get to a point where acceptance is automatic. That's another thing awareness does for you. It develops within you this faculty so that acceptance is automatic, so that your default attitude and response to everything, okay, given this, what do I want, right? Now I call that spiritual motivation, right? Because you're spiritual in the sense that you're accepting, but you're also motivated. You say, okay, given this, what do I want?
Yep. All right, we'll take one last question here. Do you work with 12-year-olds with sadness? Could your service work for them? So we don't work directly with children, but with the parents of the children to better understand dynamics. So with sadness, you would be probably wanting to look into some G&M stuff around depression, potentially tracks around the territorial type of conflicts. And so, that's kind of its own thing. In awareness school, though, you as a parent would develop a lot of skills for modeling for your child how to navigate life, how to navigate external circumstances. Oh, I'm sad because this thing happened. We learn how to do that. We learn how to, live reflexively from the external world. And we learn that because of the default patterns our parents have for how they deal with life. And so, in a situation like that, I would want to get really curious as a parent myself to okay, how do I, model unconsciously for my child that we get sad when bad things happen, or when something goes wrong in life, how have I modeled for my child how to handle that? And so awareness school would kind of help you to become more aware of your own mechanical thinking, your own mechanical reactions, how you generate sadness. And so that's how we work it from the angle of awareness school. And then obviously like with G&M, we look at some very specific conflict related things that happen to the child preceding the sadness coming on.
I wouldn't. When I was 12, I didn't even want to go to the eye doctor. I can't imagine if my parents tried to get me to take a personal growth course, regardless of how good it was or how much I needed it or whatever. The only way to teach this stuff to children is to live it around them. Yeah. That's how you have to do it. We have a number of parents who have taken awareness school, and they kind of, I think one lady who, I think she's done awareness school, she's done some of her courses anyway, and she jokes about Uncle Steve and Melissa or whatever, and like because they hear just the stuff playing all the time. That could be effective if you're learning it. Mm-hmm. That's the big thing. You do, sometimes it's tough with children, I think, because children are people. Sometimes there are more people than adults are because they got less stuff interfering, and there are things that a person will benefit from knowing, but you've also got to take into consideration what is it like for that person to have someone else try to teach them this stuff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times it's weird and uncomfortable. If I could be around someone, and I would have to, in order to teach this stuff to a child, I'd have to form like a friendship relationship with them. It would have to be could be a community thing. But it would, and it would have to be a natural process, and I think usually, obviously, the parents are typically in a better position for that. And the other thing too is I think that when you're dealing with a child that feels like that, you got to be real careful, in my opinion, with regarding the child's state as needing alteration. Because children are very psychologically attuned and they're very sensitive in the sense that they detect, right? And so if they're sad about whatever's going on, then there probably is something going on that they're sad about, and then there's you who's well-intentioned trying to get the child to not there. It's easy to take on the attitude of a broken lawnmower or a car that makes a weird sound when you turn it on. I mean, even though it is different, there is, and your mind wants to categorize it as something we got to change, something we got to fix. That can feed into stress or on the part of the child, and so it's a really indirect approach. I mean, if it's like a serious situation where it's like something bad could happen, I mean, at that point, I guess maybe you have to take them to see someone. That's kind of fraught, but I suppose that could potentially be beneficial. But for me, the best thing I would do is, like, I want to improve my life. I want to improve my mind. I want to figure out how better to deal with this situation, with all situations. Do that around the child and allow the child's interest. Or maybe it's not even interest, but maybe they just absorb something that they hear you learning or hear you talking about. And don't do this thing where you have a conversation with them and it's real casual. They know exactly what you're doing and a wall goes up. But like, sometimes a child will learn something from you and never mention it, but they'll apply it inwardly and things can improve that way. So I'm really sensitive about teaching this stuff to kids because I just know how weird and uncomfortable it feels to have an adult come over and say, well, okay, how you feeling? All right, we're going to do this course now. I mean, one of the most wonderful things about children is they don't like taking courses like this. It's one of the best things about young people is that they're not kind of personal growth enthusiasts, and kind of one of the things we try to do with our stuff is try to break people of this personal growth kind of addiction so that it becomes something that they can actually sort of do in their life. And so there's information in the course that the child would probably benefit from. The child is a person, but it's probably going to have to be filtered through you, and it's probably going to have to be filtered indirectly. Mm-hmm. If you take the course with the intention of filtering to the child, it won't work. If you take the course and say, well, honey, let me tell you about this thing I learned, that won't work. You've got to take it. You've got to, not forget about your child's situation, but forget about using the course to improve the child's situation. Take the course for your own purposes while you do as a parent what you feel like you need to do for the child, and then let it start kind of coming out of you like a sponge that's saturated. You've got to saturate yourself with this information before you can effectively transmit it to somebody else. If you want to get it core to core instead of surface level to surface level, you've got to be so saturated with not only the information, but with the consequences of your application of the information that you exude it as naturally as you exude love for them or you exude anything else that you're really enthusiastic about. Because a child can tell the difference between the way you talk about what you really enjoy, your hobby and stuff like that, and how you talk about something that you think you should do, you think they should do, so on and so forth. So when you're trying to teach your children, remember your children are smarter than you. That's the most important thing. And then you can interact intelligently and competently and in ways that are productive and in ways that put you in control when you're interacting with someone who's smarter than you, but you've got to be prepared to acknowledge that you're interacting with someone who's cleverer than you are. That just a few things.
Really good. Thank you guys for joining us today. Where to School starts on Tuesday. This is our morning round, 10 a.m. Tuesdays for the next 10 weeks. We'll be diving deep into this stuff, and we'd love for you to join us if it's the right time for you to jump in. So have a great rest of your Sunday. See you later.
See ya.